Putting together the Coliseum video upload a few weeks back got me thinking about the old WWF magazine and how we used to consume wrestling as a whole in a much different way. It always felt like a hunt or a mission to get your hands on wrestling tapes in the 90s, especially if you lived in the UK. Even worse if you're not in mainland UK and you don't have many contacts who could get more obscure tapes. But it always felt like an accomplishment when you finally got to see that show or match that had eluded you for months or even years. You can kinda draw the same comparison with wrestling information. Back then it was all magazines, and now, just like wrestling shows, it's all available at a click of a button. You'd have your fans who were more in the know who would subscribe to newsletters and stuff like that, but I, nor nobody I knew, were subscribed to any dirt sheets. So around here, you'd walk into a newsagent's and hope they had the WWF magazine, or you'd get your ass up and walk into town to buy the magazine. A journey to buy the magazine for me, from my old home into town back then, would have been around 2 hours. So compare that to just clicking on a website today, it's pretty nuts. And you know what, just like searching for and collecting the VHS tapes, it was fun and there were no complaints. It was part of being a wrestling fan and it was awesome. I still have a ton of old Power Slam magazines, but I didn't keep any of my WWF magazines or WWF Raw magazines, unfortunately. But I did manage to find a ton online, and I had so much fun reading the articles and interviews while getting lost in the total kayfabe nature of the publications. One article I remember very well, written by Vince Russo, was published in the January 1997 edition, and it contained predictions for the whole year. And after reading through these predictions, you're going to quickly find out that loads of these were actually spoilers. The magazine absolutely told us what was going to happen throughout the year, and I found some of these little predictions very fascinating. So for something a little different today, and because we wrapped up 1997 and reliving the war, let's take a look at each of these predictions written in the WWF magazine, and let's see if these predictions were actually just a ton of spoilers from Vince Russo. Okay, so the article's broken down into predictions for different wrestlers, managers, commentators, and even Vince McMahon himself. You gotta keep in mind that this magazine would have hit shelves before the 1997 Royal Rumble, but the content inside the pages was written around late October 1996. It is the January issue, but the results for In Your House Buried Alive are in here, so that tells us when the actual pages and content of the magazine were put together. Remember your heels and babyfaces from this era too, because some of these sound very far-fetched, yet they still come true. The first prediction regards Steve Austin, and it says, "We may as well open it up with a prediction that's way out there, way out there. By the end of 1997, Stone Cold Steve Austin will be in a major feud with the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels." Whereas that may not seem surprising to anyone, here's the twist. Austin will not be in the corner opposite Shawn, he'll be sharing the same corner with him. Okay, so that prediction came true. Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels did team up in 1997 and they became WWF Tag Team Champions. They would end up having a match at the 1997 King of the Ring against each other while holding the tag belts. But yeah, Austin did share the same corner as Shawn Michaels. The next prediction regards Paul Bearer and Mankind. Remember, Mankind was being managed by Paul at this time. Throughout 1997, the Mankind family will continue to grow at a rapid pace. Relatives and close family friends will come out of the woodwork, making this crazy clan a force to be reckoned with by the year's end. There will be no reconciliation between Bearer and The Undertaker, and in fact, their hatred towards each other will only dig deeper and deeper. This one's a little off the mark, but you can piece a few things together if you wanted to. Paul began managing Vader in early 1997, but that relationship dissolved pretty quickly. You could also take into account Dude Love and Cactus Jack as being part of Mankind's family, but I don't think that's what Russo was getting at here. The thing about no reconciliation between Taker and Bearer though was on point, and the hatred digging deeper was also true, seeing as Paul would bring up Taker's dead parents and the whole Kane revelation. Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith. The reign for the brothers-in-law as World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Champions will be short-lived. That, however, will not be the big news. By the first glance of the summer sun, Bulldog and Owen will be involved in an ugly and bitter family feud that will make the flames between the brothers' heart look like a two-twig campfire. Yeah, some of this was right and some of it was off the mark. The tag title reign wasn't short-lived. Owen and Davey held onto the belts from September 1996 to May 1997, so I wouldn't call that a short run. Owen and Davey did get involved in a feud though, and they had that excellent match for the European Championship in Germany. Things got pretty heated between Owen and Bulldog, and it was brother Bret who brought peace to the family. Alright, here we go. Here's Vince Russo's thoughts on James E. Cornette's 1997 aspirations. 1997 will be the year Kem Cornette finally burns to the ground. After various unsuccessful attempts to gain the World Wrestling Federation title, the man they call Vader will fire Cornette, prompting the now ex-manager to find employment elsewhere. Before the end of the year, however, James E will land himself a job with some renegade promotion based in Philadelphia. Fucking hell. Alright, so Kem Cornette pretty much ended when Paul Bearer began managing Vader at the start of the year. I wouldn't say Kem Cornette burned to the ground. Cornette as an on-screen manager just kinda fizzled out. He did bring in that NWA faction though in early 1998. Russo thinks Jim's gonna get fired and he'll end up working for ECW. Jim did show up in ECW during 1997 to help out Jerry Lawler, but call me crazy and all, I just don't think ECW was a place Mr. Cornette would have stayed on a full-time basis. I've noticed a few other articles and other issues too where Russo takes jabs at Cornette, so this was nothing new. Alright, Crush. Don't be surprised if Crush's singles career doesn't live up to its high expectations. With his hunger to disobey all the rules, Crush will soon find himself in the Federation doghouse. However, don't lock the door and throw away the key just yet. A former old buddy of the ex-inmate will show up just in the nick of time to get Crush back on track. Yeah, I'm gonna say that one's off the mark. I didn't know there were any expectations around Crush's singles career to begin with. You could say the old buddy was Brian Lee and the two started the DOA faction, but I think that's a stretch too. Farouk. There's IC gold in the future of Farouk in 1997. However, the real story here is that by the time the leaves fall, Farouk and Ahmed Johnson will be one of the most impressive tag teams the WWF has ever known. Two wrongs and a right here. Farouk did not win the IC Championship in 1997. He did team up with Ahmed Johnson though when Ahmed joined the nation. They certainly weren't one of the most impressive tag teams the WWF has ever known though. Farouk would have made a great IC champion in 1997, no doubt, and gotta say, it was a bold enough prediction to say that Ahmed and Farouk would eventually team up. Goldust. The truth about Goldust, who he really is, will not only be revealed, but it will shock the wrestling world. I'd say this prediction did come true. When Goldust left Marlena and he became the artist formerly known as Goldust, he specifically said he was free and able to be who he really is. Goldust's new, more risque character could be seen as something that shocked the wrestling world too. So yes, this was a prediction that came true, or it was a spoiler, whatever way you want to look at it. Bret the Hitman Hart. As of press time, Bret's future in the World Wrestling Federation is still unknown. I, however, just don't see Bret leaving the Federation until he takes care of some unfinished business. That, of course, being the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. Personally, I think Bret will make a full-fledged comeback, regain the Federation title, and then, and only then, trade it in for a Hollywood contract. So the press time was definitely after In Your House Buried Alive and before Survivor Series 1996. That confirms it. Bret did come back and win the WWF Championship. He did have a rivalry with the Heartbreak Kid too, and you know what? You could say he traded it all for a Hollywood contract. Hear me out. This isn't what Russo meant, but here's how you could stretch this one. Bret said when he first opened up negotiations with Eric Bischoff, he wanted the same contract as Hollywood Hulk Hogan plus 1 cent. Bret didn't get that, of course, but still, it's a way you could kind of flip this one over and make it work. Bret did not get into Hollywood movies though after his WWF run. Triple H and Mr. Perfect. The scam known as the Perfect Alliance will come to an abrupt and not so perfect end when Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Mr. Perfect discover that their respective egos cannot coexist in the same habitat. By the time the ball falls in Times Square, Perfect and Helmsley will square off in the middle of the ring in an eagerly anticipated and much overdone perfect match. The Perfect Alliance did come to an abrupt end, and that's because Perfect left the WWF and he eventually joined WCW, so none of this came to be. Helmsley vs Perfect could have been interesting, but instead we got 200 million Hennig vs DDP and Hennig vs Flair matches on WCW Nitro. Doc Hendrix. After excessive and unrelenting scrutiny by journalist Vic Venom, Doc Hendrix, aka Michael P.S. Hayes, will come out of retirement, facing the controversial columnist to physically eat his words. So basically, Doc Hendrix will come out of retirement to beat the shit out of Vince Russo. That didn't happen. Next. Ahmed Johnson. Look for a dramatic change in Ahmed Johnson in 1997. Both his religious and political views will come to the forefront, taking full priority over his life. In an effort to follow his God, the Almighty Allah, Ahmed will turn his back on the fans and become one of the most feared and hated athletes in the history of the World Wrestling Federation. We already touched on this one. Ahmed did indeed turn his back on the fans, but he wasn't one of the most feared nor hated athletes in the World Wrestling Federation. The heel turn was a massive flop, but it was due to Ahmed getting injured, so you can't be too harsh. Ahmed's religious beliefs were never brought to the forefront during his heel turn though. It was more about Vince McMahon not giving him opportunities and the nation understanding him more than McMahon in the World Wrestling Federation. Mark Henry. The world's most strongest man will find out that the superstars in the World Wrestling Federation are not just a bunch of weighted dumbbells. After suffering a severe injury in the ring at the hands of a heartless opponent, Henry will turn to another former Olympian in an effort to gain the proper tutelage and guidance needed in order to succeed in the squared circle. Once that secondary education is completed, Henry will come back with a vengeance. So Russo predicts Mark Henry would get injured, I think he was already injured at the time, and he seeks guidance from another former Olympian. He'd then come back and he'd kick everyone's ass. This secondary education thing makes me think of a silver medalist, secondary, and the only person I could think of would be Danny Hodge, but I'm not so sure if that would have happened in 1997. Plus, I'm not so sure if Vince Russo would have came up with something like this. Kurt Angle did have discussions in the World Wrestling Federation in 1996 following the Olympics, by the way, but yeah, this is a swing and a miss. Rocky Maivia. This rookie sensation will go on to have a stellar 1997. However, toward the year's end, a former ally of his father Rocky will return to the squared circle to kick some dirt in the face of the bright sensation. Another swing and a miss, Rocky didn't have a stellar 1997, not until the end of the year when he turned heel. Russo's also implying that maybe Tony Atlas would show up to cause Rocky some issues, but that didn't happen either, so no points for this one, I'm afraid. Clarence Mason. In 1997, Clarence Mason will successfully put together one of the most fearsome stables ever to be housed in the World Wrestling Federation. His firm, as he will dub it, will dictate the future of the Federation in 1997, and at some point during the year, Mason will shock the world when he signs, on the dotted line, one of the most popular fan favourites in Federation history to serve as the head counsel of this malicious group. Clarence Mason was in the earliest incarnation of the Nation of Domination, so maybe this firm was hinting at that. You could say Mason signing the popular fan favourite was supposed to be Ahmed Johnson, but who knows? Again, we're stretching here, so I'll say this one was off the mark also. Vince McMahon. Under brilliant legal counsel, Jim Ross will find a loophole in his contract, forcing Vince McMahon to turn full control of the World Wrestling Federation and Titan Sports over to him. What the fuck? The only way that McMahon will be able to seize his family business back is by paying Ross and his attorneys the cool sum of $100 million, or by agreeing to settle it in the old-fashioned way, in the middle of the ring. For another possible scenario, see Jim Ross below. Fucking hell. Let's just check Jim Ross's prediction. Jim Ross, after discovering a loophole in his contract that names him the owner, CEO and chairman of Titan Sports, Jim Ross will be indicted for failing to file his 1996 Connecticut income taxes. In his deposition, Ross will state that he really didn't mean that Connecticut was literally a hellhole. However, the judge, a long-term resident of the Constitution state, doesn't buy it and forces Ross to pay his back taxes, which causes him to lose everything. It's the fucking ramblings of a madman, isn't it? We have gone from things that did happen, things that could happen, to things that are complete batshit crazy, absolute fantasy bullshit. Not going to entertain this one. Wildman Mark Mero and Sable. Early in 1997, Mark Mero and Sable will go their separate ways as a result of the continuous verbal lashings of the beautiful valet by the Wildman. In time, Mero's true feelings will surface when he rescues Sable from the clutches of her new physically abusive employer, whose name you will never forget. The two will reunite and possibly hear wedding bells by summer's end. This one's kinda interesting. Mero would give Sable a ton of verbal lashings and the two would eventually go their separate ways, but that didn't happen until 1998. The second part about Sable being in the clutches of her new abusive employer, Russo's saying here it's going to be Goldust and Mero's going to save Sable from Goldust. That part's very similar to the Brian Pillman and Marlena storyline that unfortunately didn't get to play out. Marlena served as Pillman's personal assistant against her will. There were rumours though that the Marlena and Pillman storyline would end with Marlena turning her back on Goldust, but it's one of those things we'll never know. Shawn Michaels. It's going to be an up and down year for the Heartbreak Kid in 1997. Early in the year, he will successfully recapture the World Wrestling Federation title, only to lose it to Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13 2 months later. From there, Shawn will go into a deep depression, forcing him to take a few months off. However, after coaxing from none other than Stone Cold Steve Austin, Shawn will return to the ring as his tag team partner for one match, regaining the Eye of the Tiger and thus recapturing the Federation title at the Survivor Series. That's crazy, isn't it? So yeah, Shawn did have a lot of ups and downs in 1997, and he did recapture the title at the beginning of the year. Before the Bret match could happen though at WrestleMania, Shawn lost his smile, so while he didn't have that match, I guess he still kinda went into a state of depression. Smiles are hard to come by, you know. Steve Austin didn't need to coax Shawn back into the ring, he came back on his own accord. The two did team up though, as mentioned earlier, and then that fucking big one at the end. Shawn Michaels did recapture the WWF title, and it did happen at Survivor Series 1997. If it's a wild guess, then it's a great wild guess. Again, remember when this article was written. Brian Pillman, before Cupid's arrow pierces the heart, the time bomb will explode. We touched on this one earlier, but how eerie is this prediction right here? Remember the Marlena relationship and how Brian passed away before the angle ended? Yeah, pretty crazy. Psycho Sid. After dropping the Federation title back to Shawn Michaels at the 1997 Royal Rumble, Psycho Sid will totally snap and return home to be comforted. Unfortunately, we'll later find out that Home Sweet Home will turn out to be none other than Mankind's comfy, cozy boiler room. Nah, completely wrong. Sid did drop the belt to Michaels, but seeing as the Alamo Dome was already booked, I think this would have been pretty easy to guess. There was no storyline with Mankind, but that would have been interesting for sure. Imagine the promos that Mankind and Psycho Sid could have had together. The Stalker. In 1997, the Stalker will hunt, but more importantly, he will be the hunted. They must have been running out of ideas here. This could apply to absolutely anyone. Sunny. With her managerial career behind her, Sunny will hire a famous Hollywood agent and become the talk of La La Land in 1997. She'll go on to star in a number of made-for-television movies until her heart leads her back to the squared circle. Alright, so Sunny did not become the talk of La La Land in 1997. If anything, Sunny's overall importance on WWF television shows dwindled as 1997 went on. She had introduced light heavyweight in mini matches towards the end of the year, and she didn't manage any superstars or teams. What about that line about her heart leading her back to the squared circle though? Russo implying too that there were some sunny days in the World Wrestling Federation? It's interesting. I couldn't see Sunny managing Bret Hart at all, though at one point you could maybe see Owen getting managed by Sunny, I guess, but that would have been shit too. The Undertaker. Throughout the early stages of 1997, the Undertaker-Mankind war will continue to boil. However, it will pale in comparison to the fate that awaits the Taker by the year's end. A secret will be revealed that could turn everybody's favourite Reaper into a helpless, almost human Clark Kent. Seriously, the Undertaker's secret angle was in development since 1996? That's pretty amazing. Yeah, this is 100% in relation to the Paul Bearer and Kane storyline that took up a lot of the Phenom's time in 1997. The Mankind and Taker feud did continue to boil, and we got a great match at Revenge of the Taker. So this one was completely on the money. It's an absolute spoiler. When Kane made his debut, The Undertaker was absolutely powerless. He wouldn't lay a finger on his brother, and he promised he would never fight his own flesh and blood. That all changed in 1998 though. Vader. In one of the business coups of the year, Vader will dump James E. Cornette as his manager after Jim Ross guarantees him the World Wrestling Federation title if he agrees to sign on the dotted line and join his rapidly growing list of clients. Russo seems to think Jim Ross was going to go completely fucking rogue in 1997 and build this insane heel faction. He's putting Ross in a lot of strange situations in 97, but remember too, this was around the time Ross brought in the fake Razor and Diesel, so yeah. Vader would end up siding with Paul Bearer briefly, and Jim Ross would stay on the commentary desk. There's nothing here. Yokozuna. Yoko will be named the comeback superstar of the year after he gets down to fighting weight and regains some of that championship form of past years. This is our last prediction, and you can't help but feeling that some of this was wishful thinking. It would have been great if Yoko got things under control, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So that's it. It's kinda crazy how many of these little bits would actually happen on TV, and although some of them were outlandish or nearly impossible, quite a few of them actually did play out, and readers got a glimpse into the future. I hope someone reaches out to Russo and asks about these predictions and how these were written. Did he intend to give so much away? Or was he told to give this much away? That kind of thing. I'll be reading a lot of these magazines back though, and if I find anything that I think you guys would like, I'll be sure to put some sort of YouTube upload together. If there were any articles in particular that you think I need to revisit, then please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and take care.